Bandwidth for changelog is provided by Fastly. Learn more at fastly.com. We move fast and fix things here at changelog because of Rollbar. Check them out at rollbar.com. And we're hosted on Linode servers. Head to linode.com/changelog. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Rollbar. Check them out at rollbar.com/changelog. Move fast and fix things like we do here at changelog. Catch your errors before your users do with Rollbar. If you're not using Rollbar yet or you haven't tried it yet, they have a special offer for you. Go to rollbar.com/changelog. Sign up and integrate Rollbar to get $100 to donate to open source projects via Open Collective. Once again, rollbar.com/changelog. Welcome to JS Party, a weekly celebration of JavaScript and the web. Tune in live on Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific at changelog.com/live. Join the community and Slack with us in real time during the show at changelog.com/community. Follow us on Twitter. We're at JSPartyFM. And now on to the show.
All right, KBall here. I'm here at Node.JS Interactive with my buddy Nick Nisi.
Hello.
And we are here with Jory Burson, the standards liaison at Boku, and Amal Hussein, the open platform? No.
Senior open web engineer.
Senior open web engineer, as well as a veteran podcaster herself. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Thank you. Hello.
We're excited to talk. So we wanted to start a little bit exploring standards, because I think standards in JavaScript is something that used to be a dirty word, and is something that we've gotten worlds better about over the last 4 or 5 years. And so can you give us kind of the insider's view on what do standards even look like for us now?
Yeah, that's a great point, and something that I hope to make in my talk tomorrow morning, that we've kind of used the word web standards a bit as like a dirty word in a way. There's a lot of history behind it that's not exactly positive. You know, you kind of conjure up some bad vibes, but it's really changed quite a bit. And I have to give a lot of credit to some folks on TC39 specifically, like Miles Borens, Dan Ehrenberg, Maggie Pint, folks who've done a lot of outreach and bringing people into the fold, opening up that sort of black box for how the process, how decisions get made, how people can participate, that kind of thing. And so I think the tides are turning a little bit. Maybe perception is changing. And so at least we hope, because it's actually quite a bit of fun. And we'd love to get more people involved. And that's a big theme for the TC39 folks at this conference. So.
Yeah. So do you want to open that black box a little bit for our listeners?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I guess what can I share? So some things that people might know, we meet about 6 times a year, TC39 does, but a lot of the work happens in the open on GitHub. So you can go to our GitHub pages and track the proposals, track the conversation, see what people are, or bring your own proposal to the table is another possibility. So all of that is pretty openly documented, and that's something that we really want to emphasize. At the meetings themselves, a lot of debate happens, a lot of discussion, presentations about different kinds of proposals, and just sort of analyzing where might there be problems, where do implementers think that there are going to be issues, that kind of thing, and then providing the feedback. It's a process that takes a long time, and that's something that I think can't be overstated. It's a lot of folks get these ideas, they get very passionate about it, and they want to see it happen now. But we can't work at that pace when we're talking about changing the web. The web is a long-term, kind of platform, and so we have to think about change management for it in a very thoughtful, pragmatic way. So the process does involve a lot of conversation and getting a lot of people to think about it, debate, provide use cases, write tests, so that we know that the decisions that are being made are the right ones. So There's a proposal process that your listeners might be familiar with, where we have different stages. There are 4 stages. We start down at the very bottom with like, hey, this is an idea. Like, let's kind of. Wouldn't it be cool if, and it can take a while to go from that stage to the final stage, stage 4, which is, everybody agrees that it's the thing to do. We have multiple, examples of use cases. We've shown that it's not, or maybe it might introduce a regression, there's tests for it. But once it gets to that stage, it's going to be in the next edition of the language, which is now produced on a yearly basis. So that can take a long time, and there's a lot of stuff that happens in between. But it's very important. Yeah.
So you mentioned the GitHub TC39/proposals is something that I have bookmarked and look at very regularly. I don't know the details of how things move, and that's one thing I was going to ask. You said that you meet 6 times a year. Do proposals move between stages only at those times during those meetings, or is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So they do a lot of discussion and work and championing and thinking and that kind of thing on the issues between, but it doesn't advance until the committee meets in person, looks each other in the eyes, and says, "Do we all agree that this is ready for the next stage?" That's really important, and I know that we want to work in an asynchronous fashion and everything, but sometimes what it takes is everybody getting in the same room, and saying, "Yes, we're really on the same page about this," and so
yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
You said anyone can introduce a proposal,
That's right.
but then does it take somebody from TC39 to champion that? Is that how it works?
So currently, ECMA International is the standards body that produces the specification, and members of ECMA companies can come and participate in the TCs. I do want to make a pitch that ECMA membership is actually really affordable, and it's a pretty, easy peasy process to join. So if participating in standards work in a formal capacity is something that you're interested in, I'm Jory.com on Twitter. Let me know. I'd be very happy to help you with your application or whatever. Easy stuff.
And that's what it takes to be there? Because we were talking about it, there's all this in the open, but what Nick is saying, that's all the decisions are happening in this room with everyone. What does it take to be in the room where it happens? So
two things. One is that you join the member organization, ECMA, and the other is that you can be an invited expert, and we're actually really open to that as well. So especially if you're thinking about joining, let us know, because we would be happy to invite you to come see what it looks like in person. I think it's worth noting that it's a 3-day event. The meeting has grown from maybe 10 people. It used to be less than 10 people working on the standard, to now I think the last meeting we had 60 people. So that's. We've got to know who's coming, basically. It could grow to the size of a small conference if we weren't careful. So, but we do want to invite folks who are interested in participating to come do that as an invited guest, especially if you're thinking about joining, or if there's an area that you would like to present to the committee about. We'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, I'd love to chime in here. I think there's so the TC39 is they're kind of put on this pedestal, right? And to some degree, rightfully so, because it's really hard work. But it's also really a self-selecting group of people. It's really tedious work. That's and the output is lovely, right? We have wonderful features like async await that are implemented in all browsers that work. But it takes a lot to get there, and I think one of the things that really makes the TC's decisions very kind of cumbersome sometimes is that there's multiple stakeholders, and the first stakeholder really being, and then the most important one being the users of the web, right? So the users of the web platform are very important, and we cannot break this for them. right? So backwards compatibility is important, making sure that implementations of new features don't break the web, any significant portion of it anyway. And so that's one stakeholder. Another stakeholder is developers, right? So people that are writing and using these APIs, these primitives. And so, does this make sense? Is it intuitive? Does this kind of fit in with the overall language design? Another very tough stakeholder is implementers. Can V8 implement this in a way that isn't going to be a huge performance burden? And what does it mean if all the implementers are on board except for one, right? And so there's these like multiple stakeholders that really kind of, I think, drive home a really hard bargain, which is why, you might see a bunch of things in proposal stages, but the reality is like things that actually make it into like the spec for reals, and make it across the finish line is like, it's a very small percentage of that, and rightfully so,
Yes.
It's really important to kind of think about what we put into the platform, because once it's there, it's like never we can't undo it, and a good example of that is even just like, symbols that we choose, there's like literally just a limited number of keys on a keyboard, and when we're looking for new symbols, we have to be really careful about picking that symbol, because once we pick it, it's gone. It's forever taken, and so these are like really, there's a lot of really hard decisions, and it's really humbling work, and being at Boku, like, and being exposed to standards a bit more closely now, right, as somebody who was kind of just standard web developer and who's now kind of working on the platform more closely, it's really humbling, and it's very insightful.
Mel makes a great point. Sometimes what we have to say no to is more important than what we say yes to, and the nature of it is that we'll maybe get a dozen or more proposals for something, and maybe just one thing is ultimately what makes it through, because you can't say yes to everything, and maybe and that's tough. And that may be part of where the negative press comes from, but it's important,
TC30 nay. and I'm okay with that personally. Yay! because the web is like a public utility. It's something that's for everyone. It's how people pay their bills. It's how people communicate. It's people's only communication medium sometimes. If they're unable to communicate otherwise, like physically otherwise. So. We can't break it, and we have to be careful.
That's right.
I'd be interested to hear a little bit. So, Amal, you mentioned there are these different stakeholders, and there was some recent interesting discussion in sort of the CSS world about the distribution of stakeholders and how it tends to be biased towards implementers. Yep. Is the same thing true in TC39? What is the balance of representation across different stakeholders?
That's a great question. The nature of it is we could come up with a dozen different specifications, but none of it matters unless it gets implemented, right? So the power is, really in the hands of the implementers. But we have quite a few folks from companies you would be surprised to hear, Airbnb, PayPal. There are a couple of smaller companies like Boku, Tilda, for example. So I would say that it's Igalia also is another one. If I were to give it a percentage, I might say like it's 50-50 would maybe be a good. I feel like it's 50-50, but the louder voices are still the implementers, because ultimately, if they don't put it in, it doesn't matter.
This episode is brought to you by our search partners at Algolia. Algolia is a powerful search as a service solution, and it's easy to integrate and use with API clients, UI libraries, and even pre-built integrations. If you've ever searched Hacker News, Teespring, Medium, Twitch, or even Product Hunt, then you've experienced the search results of Algolia's search API. We even use Algolia here to changelog to power our search. We're able to fine-tune our indexing, gain insights from search patterns, as well as analytics. We can create custom query rules to influence our content's ranking behavior. We have full control. It's awesome, and we love it. Check the show notes for a link to get started for free, or learn more by going to algolia.com. That's ALGOLIA.com.
So let's go back a little bit and talk about the staging of things. I think there was some interesting stuff we were talking about, maybe covering in terms of when do you jump in on something, what do the different stages mean, and what happens if you start using something before it's fully solidified, and that sort of area. So what are those stages, and what do they imply for developers?
Yes. So, I'm a conservative person. I'm fairly risk averse. So my advice to people is don't implement it until, it's actually in, it's published. But generally, if somebody wants to implement something in stage 4, that's okay. That's a safe bet. Usually, if it's stage 4, it's not coming out. It's going to be adopted in the final draft of the spec. It's when you start looking at things that are younger than that, less mature ideas, that you get into the super danger zone. And again, the first stage being this is an idea. You might want to implement it as just as a test case, a proof of concept. By stage 3, we expect there to be tests and some really solid use cases. In stage 4, that's when you're in the safer zone. But
what's the process for making decisions about what's moving from stage to stage?
So what happens is somebody will author a proposal and they will bring it to the meeting. A champion brings it to the meeting and presents. There's discussion. And at the end of that discussion, the champion might ask, what do you guys think? Or y'all think? Do you think it's time? Can we move it to the next stage? And the committee will say yes or no. We want to see, more XYZ. So then the champion will take that feedback, or they'll get their green light to move it to the next stage, and then they have more work to do, right? So, and that all happens on the champion's timeline, or whoever has authored the proposal. It's at they move at the pace that they can move, that the group of people who feel like this is important can move. So it's not like it's not a timeline driven sort of thing. It's an effort and how much time, I guess it's time intensive in that how much time does it take to get people to the table, to get the idea kind of seasoned, if you will.
And to get that green light, is that a majority vote? Is that a unanimous consensus? What does that look like?
So we're consensus seeking, and so a lot of times the question is, does anybody oppose moving this to the next stage? And a lot of times the answer is yes. So
really, anyone has a veto power almost.
Yeah. Everybody comes, to the table as peers. Mm-hmm. So anybody could say, I'm not comfortable with that, or I would be more, and that's just an opportunity to discuss the issue more acutely. So the debate is very valuable, and people saying, it's not a bad thing. It's very healthy.
And you mentioned tests are part of that, and I think Amal, you're a big part of that. Can you describe what that is, what the process is around tests, and how that affects a proposal moving through the standards process?
Yeah, sure. TC39 maintains the official conformance suite for testing JavaScript, which means it's tests written in JavaScript that test JavaScript, and I say that because these tests are run in different JavaScript engine runtime contexts, and so it tests how V8, for example, or JavaScript core, which is the WebKit runtime. How does it implement this feature, right? And so we write tests which basically follow the specification, and so we try to break things, so there are tests, that have invalid inputs, etc. So we test the expected and we test the unexpected, and then those tests are then used to, by implementers, so they basically import that project, run it in their own CI process, and it helps implementers when they're adding features, basically to test their code, and so it's this wonderful like validation, and it's something that really drives interoperability. It's like really important for like making sure that JavaScript Core's implementation of generators is the same as Chrome's, and it's not going to cause weird bugs, and everybody wins, right? So it's to push web interoperability, but also it like heavily speeds up development process for implementers, because if they have tests and they're not having to think about it or write their own, it really helps aid the process tremendously. And I'm really proud to say that like my coworker, my teammates, Rick Waldron. Actually, Rick was technically my boss. He's my boss. My boss, Rick Waldron, my teammate Leo Balter are maintainers for TC for the project. It's a small body of maintainers, and I've contributed to that project as well.
Is it a custom testing platform? Like, it's not like Just or something, right?
It is not Just, but it is just like in the sense that it's a light, very thin test harness that's used for the development purposes, but every implementation has their own like runner and harness and all of that. For us, it's very minimal, and it's very unlike writing tests for like a web application where you're trying to be dry and reuse things, and you have a set of helpers. Like you're writing tests for the spec, which means that like you don't have to ever really edit this test again, and every test has to be atomic, so literally like one specification will introduce like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tests because every test file tests like one line in the spec. And there might be multiple test files for one line even, and so it's very atomic, very different. Like there's no like concept of like adding spies and mocks or, it's like as minimal like as possible. And even when you're testing features in like ES6, let's say we're writing tests for async await, we're not really going to be using arrow functions or whatever else. Like we're not going to be using other ES6 features. Like we have to like minimize the usage of JavaScript features in the specification year that we're testing for. So it's a very different type of project, and I think we're going to be writing a bit more about that on Boku's blog. Just what it's like to contribute to this.
And I think contributing is a great way to get familiar with the spec. So it's if you really love tests, Amal loves tests. I love tests. If you really love tests, it's a great way to learn the specification as well.
It's really cool. I honestly did not know that that is something out there that I could contribute to. So.
You can contribute and you'll learn a lot for it.
Yeah.
And it's a really wonderful gift that will outlive you and all of us,
Yeah.
Because the web is here to stay, hopefully.
It also
right?
sounds like it's a pretty low barrier way to get involved because these things are so tiny and atomic that if you only have a little bit of time and you want to learn about a little bit of the spec, you go, you write 3 or 4 tests, and you're in the door. You've started onboarding and you started contributing back to not just open source, but to the entire platform of the web.
Yeah, and I actually want to make a comment about other ways to get involved beyond joining and going to these meetings, which are laborious. The tests are a great way. Contributing use cases, trying out some of the implementations in your own projects and providing feedback on that are all really effective data points. There's a couple of different efforts to improve documentation and to get more feedback from different groups like educators, for example, like what can we be doing to make the language more accessible to newcomers. Those are all really important things to be talking about beyond what new crap can we put in this language next year, which is fine, but also we have a lot of crap, so.
That's really good. I didn't consider getting those perspectives. That's a really good thing to hear that's happening.
Yes,
so more than just getting features and syntactic sugar and making my life easier, but actually, does it actually provide benefit beyond that?
Yeah.
I'd be curious to hear a little bit about what are the boundaries of what is and is not specified. One thing that came up in a recent JS party that we were talking about was error messages, and the fact that the same error can have different error messages across every different browser.
Yeah.
Where are the lines that are left up to the discretion of the implementer?
That is a great question.
Yeah. Oh, I have so many thoughts on this.
Okay, you go for
So
it.
I wrote a bunch of tests for Atomics, which is like, this awesome new feature. It's a new built-in that's coming into the language that basically brings threading to JavaScript. It's like sick. It's so amazing. Anyway, so this was kind of like my first big stab at like contributing tests into Tester 6.2, and one of my annoyances were like, why are the messages not standardized? And I kept like harping on this, like this doesn't make any sense at all. Like my web developer brain, I'm thinking like, adding logging and messaging. It's all about having your namespaces and making sure that you can trace things down to where it came from, and how are you supposed to know the difference between the same error that's happening in Safari versus Edge? And so apparently, like, it's really difficult to standardize like that. And so reading through the specification, you'll see that there's a bunch of things that have like double square bracket, and those are kind of like internal implementation details. So they're not specified, like how they're implemented isn't specified, but how their behave is. So it's like behavior versus implementation. And so there's some things that are left up to the implementers because they're writing the code, and that part is like it's unreachable by JavaScript, right? So the parts that we can observe are the parts that we test, which is that an error is being thrown. But the contents of that error are not really like, it's not really where the value is, right? It's just that like when this thing happens, an error should be thrown. When this thing happens, like, we can assume XYZ conditions, so there's assumptions, and then there's like internal implementations, and then there's what's actually observable, and and so there's just, it's multi-layered, and it deserves its own discussion, and I think with implementers, like, because I think it's a fascinating topic.
If you're listening to this and you're an implementer, we want to talk to you.
Yeah, I don't know,
Why are
Jory.
your error
Is there anything
messages?
else you wanted to add to that? I think.
No, I mean, I think you nailed it. I mean, it's one of those things where there's, for a lot of people on the committee, like there's a desire to specify further, and then there's lots of pushback the other way, and in the standards process itself, it's all about that push-pull between like web developers want X and implementers need to focus on Y, and so what's the harmonious balance we can reach in between, and that's why it takes so long sometimes. So.
Yeah, it really, like, it can take like multiple committee meetings for one little thing to advance just partially, let alone because everybody comes back with like lots of really smart people breaking down a problem and and finding the holes. The
most glorious bike shed you've ever witnessed.
And I want to make a community service announcement, actually, since we're talking about standards. And this is something that I know Jory is extremely passionate about as well. But please stop using proposals in production.
Yes.
And it's a good segue into my like, but like proposals are proposals, and they will change. They're almost guaranteed to change. Decorators is a prime example of that. So Babel makes it really easy for us to use these kind of stage 0, stage 1 presets, but they've now since like kind of added messages and warnings, saying like, this is not, just an FYI, like, this is going to change. This is not real JavaScript yet. So just understand that like it's a major maintenance burden for you and your teams just moving forward. Like, somebody might write some automated way to refactor it, but it's still like something that you have to do. And it's still like decisions that need to be made by product teams and QA teams. And, it's just not worth it. So be responsible and only use real JavaScript. We should make like a real JavaScript sticker.
Keep calm and use real JavaScript.
Like real
like
TM
it,
JavaScript.
I wonder if you can make like a Michael Politan reference where you do the 3 things, like use JavaScript, not too much, mostly real, or
Mostly real.
proposal stage 3 or above, or something.
Right.
Only shop at Whole Foods JavaScript.
Use real JavaScript, not too much.
Yeah.
I primarily write TypeScript, and so I kind of go by that as the new features that when they get added to that language, then I can kind of start using them. But so kind of segueing into your talk a little bit, tell us a little bit about what you're going to be talking about at the conference.
Yeah, sure. So my talk is on machine-powered refactoring, so leveraging ASTs, which are abstract syntax trees, to basically push your legacy code and the web forward. And your legacy code and consequently like the web forward. And so the idea is that the web is like an evolving and moving target, and we have, as Jory so eloquently pointed out, new specifications that are being added to the language. So the language itself is shifting, the web APIs are shifting, and new things are getting added. Dependencies are getting changed, versioned, or deprecated, and you have code that you also want to deprecate. Right? So we have all these changes that we need to make, and we need to kind of really get comfortable with automating that process and doing it in a safe way, and using tools that are better than regex, or simple find and replace.
There's nothing better than regex.
Yeah, regex. My brain, if you say it 3 times, my brain will explode. So please just careful on the number of
regex.
Yeah,
it's Halloween, so maybe a Beetlejuice will show up.
Yeah. So basically,
isn't there a statement about that, right? Like any problem, you're going to eventually reduce it to doing regex. So like anything dealing with text.
And then you have 2 problems.
Yeah,
I like
exactly.
that.
I mean, they're so powerful up to a point.
Yeah.
And then you can get yourself in so much worlds of pain.
So basically, ASTs are this powerful thing that helps. So when your code is basically processed by a language parser, it first gets broken down into a tree, and that tree is like this predictable data structure that then you can use to safely make changes to your code and kind of do an in-place regeneration. And so those were kind of the things that I'll be exploring tomorrow.
This episode of JS Party is brought to you by onemonth.com, one of the best places to learn how to code in just 1 month. Their courses have helped over 60,000 students go from knowing zero about coding to building programs in languages like JavaScript, Python, and Ruby. Onemonth.com graduates have gone on to get jobs at awesome startups like Airbnb, Instagram, and Spotify. Their courses are easy to follow with step-by-step video tutorials, instructor-led with weekly assignments reviewed by your instructor, and results-driven, with each student graduating the course with a portfolio of projects to show prospective employers, as well as a certificate of completion. If you're interested in taking your career to the next level, head to onemonth.com/JSParty and get 10% off any coding course. Once again, that's onemonth.com/JSParty to get 10% off any coding course. A big thank you to onemonth.com for supporting JS Party and online education.
So there's a lot of tools around that, and there's even lots of ASTs. And do they all kind of have similar data structures that they eventually get converted into, or do they all have their own subtle intricacies between them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So ASTs, so there is an effort to standardize, ASTs and just tokens in general. But currently, there's a few different competing versions. So Babel has depending on what parser you're using. Esprima, Babel, Acorn, etc. They're all a little different, but as long as you're using the same one to make your changes continuously throughout your process, you shouldn't have any issues, right? It's when you're mixing things, that you kind of get into trouble. But that's a great question.
Nice. So what are the problem domains in which someone should look at doing that, and where does the line come where you say, okay, this is not actually easy to do from a machine, we need to get a person involved?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you have a change that is, I would say, queryable, and it's that's a known like a finite and scoped problem, right? For example, we changed the API of this class, which is now used all over our code base to take an extra parameter. So now I want to refactor like across the code base safely. How would I do that? And so that's a good use case for an AST. And you can also leverage an AST-based transformation. You can also leverage error handling or adding in like a code snippet or something like a marker for something that you want to maybe do manually. Like if it doesn't, if it's like a 90% match for your use case, but you're like, oh, I found something that's funny, that's something that you can also do. It's a little trick, but you can do that.
So I have a little bit of experience with this. I work on the Dojo project, and we have a CLI tool and a bunch of components, plugins for that. And one of them is an upgrade tool. So we've been making some drastic changes as we go, and we consolidated 8 packages into one package for between versions. So one really easy transform was go look for any import, go look at all the imports, and if they match where this import was, change it to this. And so that's a really easy finite one. But as we get more and more complex, another example is something where we have something that still exists, a component that still exists, but instead of it being like a higher order function that you would call that returns a component, you just use it as a component. And so I can go through and query the data structure, the AST, find out if it's being imported, what its name is, find that token in there, and then see if it's actually being called or if it's just being passed as an argument. And from there, I can't really refactor that, but I can output logging and say, hey, you're using this here, it's changed, you should go in and fix that.
Yeah, and that's something that I get into too. Like it's an ability for you to query your code base, right, and understand like where does the complexity lie? Where do I have like 7 function calls that are being made from one function? Where do I have like 17 variables, being defined? Like, it's a way for you to understand like what are the patterns of your code base, and then also take the opportunity to like improve your custom linting rules as well.
Yeah.
So I always like if you make a transform or if you are doing something that you've deprecated some API or whatever, like you can, also use ASTs to extend out your linter to like be a bit more accustomed to your team's conventions and like, or you can use it to like reinforce this bug from never happening, So like if you ever fix a bug, like you should ask yourself like, hey, can I, is there a linting rule or is there something that I can do to automate this so that nobody else has to ever fix this bug again? If the answer is yes, then go do that. And then the next question should be, if the answer is no, then okay, can I write a unit test so that like our build will and then if the answer is no, I can't write a unit test, okay, then can I write an integration test? And the answer will definitely be yes, So there's like multiple layers for also just like stopping regressions from happening, and trying to automate that and make that like as binary as possible just takes the human emotion and human time out of it, which is like really valuable. So does that make sense to y'all?
Yeah, definitely. That's not something that I had really considered either. I haven't written custom linting rules.
Super easy. Come to my talk tomorrow. You'll learn how.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Well, and I don't know, I imagine these talks are going to be published online at some point.
I was just wondering that myself, and I feel like I should know that, but I don't know that.
I don't know.
There are cameras in the back of the room.
Yeah,
so.
I think they're all getting recorded.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this, check and see
YouTube.
if Amal's talk is up yet.
Yeah, hopefully.
And they usually get them up really quick after the event, too.
Awesome.
So that's nice.
So are there any tools or references or places to start for someone who is interested in learning more about ASTs that you'd recommend?
My talk on YouTube.
Yeah. Definitely.
And my link to my slides, which, maybe we can include in the show notes or something.
Yeah, for sure.
But
Send
there's also like an awesome AST, which is kind of sparse, but I have a bunch of resources that I've put together when I was researching from my talk, so I hope to add to that list. So.
If y'all have time, I'd love to poke at one other subject, which is, Boku is an open source consultancy, which is a model that I think that certainly fascinates me, but I think is probably something a lot of our audience may be interested in as well. Can you describe what does that even mean? Open source consultancy as compared to just an agency or something else?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So yes, we like to call we're professional services firm, right? And so there's a lot of different types of these kinds of companies in different industries, and we serve the open source and open web, tech industry. So what that meant in 2009, when the company was first formed, and what it means now are different, because like everything changes, and you kind of have to be, stay with the changes. So in 2009, it meant convincing people that JavaScript was a language worth learning and using in enterprise. It meant teaching people a lot about new tools like jQuery that they could use, to better, work with the DOM and that kind of thing. And it's evolved over time to include a lot of work on tools and things that make life better for developers. And that's really, I think, whatever happens with technology in the future, I think what Boku will be doing is whatever it needs to be done in order to help advocate and improve the lives of developers and users that they support, right? Because that's the other constituency that we care a lot about. In practice, today that means we're working a lot on infrastructure tools and primarily the test suites, but also Amal's team. If you want to plug Gaia really quick.
Oh yeah. So I've kind of so at Boku, our model is we have engineers that work on our reliability standards and testing projects with our browser vendors, and then some of us also work still kind of do what Boku was really kind of famous for, which is we make amazing web apps, but we've kind of really evolved from making amazing web apps, which we feel like the community's really there, right? But we're pushing the boundaries now with computer vision and augmented reality and games and interactive media, right? So web applications that are that have all of those components that are a little bit more niche, and so we're not really working on standard React Redux apps. We're working on really complex things that kind of really leverage the web API. Web platform APIs heavily, and our expertise on these APIs kind of really helps us help our customers kind of push the boundaries forward with what they can do with their web applications.
So I think to your point about what's really the difference between that kind of service versus an agency, where we try and serve is in that sort of longer term relationship and commitment, not just to the technology, but also to the product, but also to the technology, and helping companies understand what the life cycle of that technology is, how to work with it in a healthy, sustainable, maintainable kind of way versus we need an application for our car rental company, which has more of a marketing and advertisement kind of focus to it. We're really there for the tools and the teams behind the tools.
Got it. So you're doing consulting work, but focused on essentially open source infrastructure. Here's
That's
how
right.
you're going to be able to use these. Here's how you plug into the web standards and that sort of thing.
Exactly. Here's how to kind of think about where your company is in its transition to maybe becoming more of a tech company. That's the thing that's of concern right now for a lot of companies. How do we go about our digital transformation? That sort of buzzword, and how do we do it in a responsible way? Because we can't just go chasing the next best framework, or whatever. That's not really going to get it done. How do we need to organize? How do we need to think? What are some of the things we need to learn? Some of the things we need to let go of? That kind of thing.
And I think my last point on this is that I think engineers at Boku are very unique in that we have a strong web developer background, but we're also really involved with the web platform. And those two worlds are actually it's funny, they're operating on the same thing. Web developers make things for the web, platform engineers make things make the web, right? Right, and it's like, but they're two different worlds, and the Venn diagram between those two is like, is small, and Boku kind of interestingly fits in both of those worlds.
We definitely have tried to do that.
Neat. Anything else y'all want to talk about?
Just how much fun I had getting to meet you two, and
this has been great, and I feel like I've learned a lot about standards and a little bit about ASTs, and now I'm really excited. I hope I can make your talk tomorrow.
Hopefully.
If not, I'm going to watch that recording.
Yeah, on YouTube.
Yes.
Hopefully, we can include it in the show notes. And thank you very much for inviting us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for tuning in to JS Party this week. Tune in live on Thursdays at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern at changelog.com/live. Join the community and Slack with us in real time during the shows. Head to changelog.com/community. And do us a favor, share this show with a friend, rate us on Apple Podcast, go into Overcast and favorite it. And thank you to Fastly, our bandwidth partner. Head to fastly.com to learn more. And we move fast and fix things around here at Changelog because of Rollbar. Check them out at rollbar.com. We're hosted on Linode Cloud servers. Head to linode.com/changelog. Check them out and support this show. Our music is produced by Breakmaster Cylinder. And you can find more shows just like this at changelog.com. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
I'm Tim Smith, and my show Away from Keyboard explores the human side of creative work. You'll hear stories sometimes deeply personal about the triumphs and struggles of doing what you love.
I ended up in hospital with burnout. I just kept ignoring the way that it was making me feel and just kept powering through it. And then eventually my body started to give me physical symptoms to say like, hey, you should stop and listen to me.
New episodes premiere every other Wednesday. Find the show at changelog.com/AFK or wherever you listen to podcasts.